BlackBerry. How the iPhone killer got killed by the iPhone. In 2007, BlackBerry owned the smartphone world. They controlled 50% of the smartphone market. Barack Obama was addicted to his BlackBerry, and the device was so synonymous with mobile communication that people called it Crackberry. Fortune 500 CEOs wouldn't leave home without one. Wall Street traders lived on them. Even Oprah Winfrey declared it one of her favorite things. The company's stock price had soared from $3 in 2003 to over $140 by 2008, making early investors millionaires. BlackBerry wasn't just a phone company, it was the phone company for anyone who mattered. Then on January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and said 6 words that would destroy a $20 billion empire. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. In less than a decade, BlackBerry would go from the king of smartphones to a cautionary tale about what happens when you refuse to evolve. This is the story of how the ultimate business phone got schooled by a company that had never made a phone before. The BlackBerry story begins in 1984 when 2 University of Waterloo engineering students, Mike Lazaridis and Douglas Freegan, founded Research in Motion in Waterloo, Canada. For 15 years, they were nobodies in the tech world, building wireless data transmission systems that most people had never heard of. But Lazaridis had a vision that seemed crazy at the time. He wanted to put email in your pocket. In 1999, RIM launched the BlackBerry 850, a chunky device that looked more like a pager than a phone because it actually was more like a pager than a phone. It couldn't make calls, but it could do something revolutionary. It could push email to your device in real time. No more checking email manually. No more waiting for messages to download. The BlackBerry would beep and you'd have mail. The device got its name because the tiny QWERTY keyboard keys looked like the seeds on a blackberry fruit. Most people thought it was a gimmick. Business executives thought it was magic. What made BlackBerry special wasn't just the hardware, it was the invisible network behind it. RIM had built their own proprietary network called BlackBerry Enterprise Server that created an encrypted tunnel between corporate email systems and BlackBerry devices. This wasn't just convenient, it was secure in a way that no other mobile device could match. Every BlackBerry message was compressed and encrypted through RIM servers in Waterloo before reaching your device. For paranoid corporate IT departments, this was perfect. They could control everything, monitor everything, and wipe devices remotely if they were lost or stolen. The BlackBerry wasn't just a phone, it was a fortress for your data. By 2002, RIM added voice calling capabilities, making BlackBerry a true smartphone 3 years before anyone even used that term. The device became the ultimate status symbol for the business elite. Having a BlackBerry meant you were important enough to need email on the go. By the mid-2000s, BlackBerry had achieved something no other tech company had managed to dominate both the consumer and enterprise markets simultaneously. The company shipped over 14 million devices in 2007 alone. Their closest competitor, Palm, was selling fewer than 2 million devices per year. BlackBerry's gross margins were an incredible 60%, meaning they made 60 cents of profit on every dollar of revenue. The addiction was real and measurable. Studies showed that the average BlackBerry user checked their device every 6 minutes during waking hours. Politicians were the worst addicts of all. During Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign, he famously fought with the Secret Service for the right to keep his BlackBerry, calling it his lifeline to the outside world. When he won the presidency, the Secret Service had to create a special ultra-secure BlackBerry just for him. Even Osama bin Laden's compound had a BlackBerry when Navy SEALs raided it in 2011. If you were powerful, connected, or important, you had a BlackBerry. But while BlackBerry was busy counting money and celebrating their dominance, a fundamental shift was happening in Silicon Valley. Apple had been watching the mobile market closely, and Steve Jobs was frustrated with his Motorola ROKR, a collaboration between Apple and Motorola that was supposed to bring iTunes to phones but ended up being what Jobs called a piece of shit. In 2005, Jobs made a decision that would change everything. Apple would build their own phone, and it would be unlike anything that existed. The iPhone project, codenamed Project Purple, was so secretive that Apple built fake walls inside their Cupertino headquarters to hide the development team. While BlackBerry was focused on making better keyboards and longer battery life, Apple was reimagining what a phone could be. They weren't trying to build a better BlackBerry, they were trying to build a computer that happened to make phone calls. When Jobs unveiled the iPhone on January 9, 2007, the BlackBerry executives in the audience weren't worried, they were confused. The iPhone had no physical keyboard. It cost $600, 3 times more than most BlackBerries. It couldn't copy and paste text. It had terrible battery life. It couldn't run third-party applications. For enterprise customers, it was completely useless because it couldn't connect to corporate email systems securely. Jim Balsillie, BlackBerry's co-CEO, famously dismissed the iPhone, saying, "It's kind of one more entrant into an already very busy space with lots of choice for consumers." RIM's stock price actually went up the day after the iPhone announcement because investors agreed that Apple had built an expensive toy for consumers, while BlackBerry owned the profitable business market. This analysis wasn't completely wrong. The first iPhone was seriously flawed. It ran on AT&T's slow edge network, crashed frequently, and frustrated business users who were used to BlackBerry's instant email and physical keyboards. What BlackBerry leadership completely failed to understand was that the iPhone wasn't competing on features. It was competing on experience. The iPhone's touchscreen interface was intuitive in a way that BlackBerry's menu systems never were. More importantly, Apple was playing a completely different game. While BlackBerry saw phones as communication devices, Apple saw them as computing platforms. In July 2008, Apple launched the App Store with just 500 applications. Within a year, there were over 100,000 apps available. Suddenly, your phone wasn't just for email and calls, it was for everything. You could play games, read books, navigate with GPS, edit photos, and do 1,000 other things that BlackBerry had never imagined. The iPhone wasn't just a better BlackBerry, it was a completely different category of device. Even more devastating for BlackBerry, the iPhone was cool in a way that business-focused devices never could be. When celebrities started carrying iPhones instead of BlackBerries, the cultural shift was unstoppable. BlackBerry's response to the iPhone was catastrophically slow and misguided. In 2008, they launched the BlackBerry Storm, their first touchscreen device, and it was an unmitigated disaster. The screen used a technology called SurePress that required you to physically click the entire screen to register touches. It was clunky, unreliable, and felt ancient compared to the iPhone's responsive touchscreen. Verizon returned millions of Storm devices due to customer complaints, and tech reviewers universally panned it. But the real problem wasn't the Storm's terrible hardware. It was BlackBerry's complete misunderstanding of what consumers wanted. RIM spent 3 years and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to build a better BlackBerry when they should have been building a BlackBerry iPhone. Their app store, BlackBerry App World, launched in 2009 with fewer than 3,000 apps, most of which were low-quality business applications. Meanwhile, the iPhone App Store was generating billions of dollars in revenue for developers and creating an entire ecosystem that made switching away from iPhone increasingly difficult. The beginning of the end came in October 2011 when BlackBerry suffered a 3-day global service outage that left 70 million users without email, internet, or messaging services. The outage started in Europe but cascaded worldwide because BlackBerry's entire network architecture relied on centralized servers in Waterloo and the United Kingdom. For 3 days, business executives, government officials, and consumers around the world were reminded of how dependent they had become on BlackBerry's proprietary network and how vulnerable that dependence made them. The outage made international headlines, and government officials in multiple countries demanded explanations. RIM's stock price dropped 20% in a single week. More damaging than the financial hit was the psychological impact on users. The outage broke the spell of BlackBerry reliability and sent millions of users searching for alternatives. Many discovered that iPhone and Android devices, which used standard internet protocols instead of proprietary networks, were more reliable and offered better backup options. By 2012, the writing was on the wall, but BlackBerry's leadership was still in denial. The company's market share had collapsed from 50% in 2009 to less than 5% by 2012. iPhone and Android devices weren't just winning with consumers, they were taking over corporate America. IT departments that had once insisted on BlackBerry-only policies were switching to bring-your-own-device programs that allowed employees to use iPhones and Android phones for work. Even Barack Obama, BlackBerry's most famous user, was photographed using an iPad, signaling that Apple was winning the battle for mindshare among influential users. RIM's revenue dropped from nearly $20 billion in 2011 to $11 billion in 2013. The company laid off 30% of its workforce and closed manufacturing facilities around the world. In January 2013, Research in Motion officially changed its name to BlackBerry Limited, betting everything on a last-ditch effort to save the company. The final nail in BlackBerry's coffin was the BlackBerry 10 operating system, launched in January 2013 with the tagline, "Built to keep you moving." BlackBerry 10 was actually a decent operating system with innovative features like BlackBerry Hub, which unified all your communications in one place, and BlackBerry Balance, which separated work and personal data on the same device. The hardware was solid too. The BlackBerry Z10 and Q10 devices were well built and responsive, but it was too little, too late. By 2013, the smartphone market was a two-horse race between iPhone and Android, and there was no room for a third ecosystem. Developers ignored BlackBerry 10 because there weren't enough users to justify the development costs. Users avoided BlackBerry 10 because there weren't enough apps. This created a death spiral that no amount of marketing could overcome. BlackBerry 10 devices sold fewer than 1 million units in their first quarter, while Apple was selling 30 million iPhones per quarter. In September 2013, just 8 months after the BlackBerry 10 launch, the company announced it was exploring strategic alternatives, corporate speak for putting itself up for sale. The most painful part of BlackBerry's collapse was how predictable it became once it started. In 2014, the company reported a loss of nearly $6 billion, mostly from writing off unsold inventory and shutting down failed projects. By 2016, BlackBerry had stopped manufacturing phones entirely, licensing their name to other companies while focusing on software and services. The company that once employed 20,000 people had shrunk to fewer than 4,000. Mike Lazaridis, the visionary founder who had invented the smartphone category, resigned from the company's board in 2013, effectively admitting defeat. The BlackBerry patent portfolio, once worth billions, was sold off piece by piece to patent trolls and competitors. Today, BlackBerry's market capitalization is less than $3 billion, smaller than many companies that didn't exist when BlackBerry dominated the smartphone world. What makes BlackBerry's fall so tragic is that it didn't have to happen. The company had every advantage: market dominance, loyal customers, profitable products, and a 10-year head start on competitors. They had the resources to build touchscreen devices, create app stores, and develop modern operating systems. But they were trapped by their own success and blinded by their own expertise. BlackBerry's leadership believed that business customers would always prioritize security and productivity over user experience and apps. They were wrong. Even the most serious business executives wanted phones that were fun to use and could do more than just email. BlackBerry's engineers, who had spent decades perfecting physical keyboards and proprietary networks, couldn't imagine that virtual keyboards and standard internet protocols might be better solutions. They were experts at building the best possible version of yesterday's technology, while Apple and Google were inventing tomorrow's technology. In the end, BlackBerry didn't lose to superior competitors. They lost to their own inability to imagine that the world might want something different from what they were selling. The iPhone didn't kill BlackBerry. BlackBerry killed itself by refusing to become something new when the old way stopped working.